And here is the story of Ruth, a male adventurer wielding a large shield who takes on the role of a tank in his labyrinthine adventures. However, he doesn't do this for money or fame, but to save his young and very sick little sister. One day after an adventure, Ruth imagines seeing his sister again, but his companion, Nin, scolds him for daydreaming in the middle of the guild and suggests he should find a partner instead. Ruth apologizes, explaining that he can't stop thinking about his sister as she is his top priority. His little sister, Manisha, suffers from an incurable disease, and the only way to save her is to find the secret treasure in the labyrinth, which is said to grant wishes. Even though he apologized, he realized from yesterday's adventure that it would be impossible to do it again. Nin tries to comfort him, saying that Ruth has done his job well as a tank by holding off all the attacks, but Ruth feels sad because he lost his shield. Without understanding why, Ruth feels he burdens Nin, a healer. However, Nin reassures him, saying that Ruth has protected them well and she feels very safe with him. Moreover, his shield can absorb 99,999. While they were talking, Claus, the great hero, entered. The guild members comment that he has conquered many labyrinths despite his young age. Claus greets Nin and Ruth, who both return the greeting and notice that Claus has brought a group of girls with him. Claus introduces them as new members of his team. Nin protests that this is wrong because only 6 people can enter the labyrinth, and now with everyone, their number becomes 7. Jigla mocks them, saying that now their number is back to 6, and dismisses Ruth, claiming that Ruth is useless as a tank because he easily loses his shield and does not fully understand all its abilities. Nin tries to defend Ruth by saying that he has fulfilled his role as a tank, but Claus argues that since Ruth can't use his abilities well, he becomes a hindrance and could cause many problems in the future. Therefore, it is better to have a new member who is also a tank but a mysterious tank, which is more popular now because they can fight and dodge, unlike Ruth, who is just a regular tank without attacks. Ruth begins to hear everyone in the guild whispering about him and decides to accept it, so he leaves. However, before he can go, Claus approaches him to take his sword, feeling Ruth owes them because he couldn't win. The day before, Nin grabbed Ruth's arm while crying because she didn't want to part with him. Ruth told her that she didn't need to feel sad and reminded her that he had already told her about the village where he lived with his sister. He hoped Nin would visit him someday because from now on, he would be living closer to his sister. They parted on good terms. Sometime later, Ruth was in the middle of the city, sitting and thinking about what the hero had said. He didn't know what to do with all his abilities and wondered if he was using his shield incorrectly, making him a bad tank. However, since he hadn't found someone with the ability to identify and explain the functions of all his abilities, he didn't know what to do with them. Moreover, he couldn't return to Avantia where his sister was because he had no money. At that moment, he heard some people talking about an escort mission to Kira's city. Ruth felt happy because the city was close to Avantia and decided to talk to them, pleading to be allowed to join their mission even without payment. They asked about his rank because he looked very strong. While they were only rank D, Ruth thought about what to say, as he was rank F because he had never left the labyrinth. However, at that moment, they recognized him as an adventurer who had once joined the heroes group and immediately accepted him. At that point, an old man who was giving the mission arrived and asked if they were ready to depart. The kids excitedly said yes and that they had a new member. Ruth introduced himself, and the old man accepted, although he wouldn't pay more than the agreed amount. The journey began normally, and although Ruth felt like he was deceiving them by not revealing his true rank, he promised to protect them until they reached their destination. During the journey, they talked and rested at night. After a few days, the road was filled with fog. The old man asked if they should rest, but Ruth suggested continuing because they were very close to the city and needed to arrive as soon as possible. However, he sensed something and thought it would be better to ask them to stop. Ruth got down to check who was ahead as it could be bandits, and as the fog slightly cleared, he saw that it was a girl who had fallen on the ground. Ruth checked the surroundings and realized that there was no one else around, understanding that it wasn't a trap. He approached the girl to ask how she was. The girl tried to get up, but a gust of wind moved her cloak, revealing that she had a magical rune embedded in her chest. Ruth recognized the rune but didn't have time to say anything because a forest serpent appeared behind the girl. He ordered her to hide while the other children were terrified at the sight of such a huge monster. Ruth saw that the snake was focusing on the children and used one of his abilities to provoke the monster, causing it to attack him instead. Ruth defended himself with his shield against the poison spewed by the snake and reassured the children not to worry, as he would hold off the monster while they attacked. However, the children were so scared that they doubted they could do it. At that moment, the snake moved and attacked them, throwing Ruth against a tree and causing him to lose consciousness. In his unconscious state, he saw his sister crying and calling out to him, which made him decide to get up and stand again. He then told the children that he didn't have a sword, so he couldn't attack, but he promised to withstand all the attacks so they could use all their strength to strike the snake. The children were motivated, and Ruth started running, promising that as the strongest tank, he wouldn't let anyone get hurt, and he believed they would succeed in defeating the monster. The children took advantage of the opportunity while Ruth was holding off the snake to attack and wound it. The monster then began gathering energy for a deadly attack, and Ruth decided not to dodge. Since it was a deadly attack, his duty as a tank was to stop it. Using his shield, he managed to block the snake's attack. At the same time, the children decided to use their maximum power to attack the snake together, and they successfully defeated it. Ruth praised them for their good teamwork and then went to check on the girl, feeling relieved to know she was alright and asking what she would do now since she had been running from the snake. The girl said she had nowhere to go, so Ruth invited her to come with him. The girl was impressed and accepted his invitation, then took his hand. However, Ruth knew they couldn't take her with them dressed as she was. Then, an old man came and brought a dress, saying the girl could wear it as a form of thanks for protecting them, as they wouldn't have survived the snake without Ruth. Ruth accepted and told the girl to change clothes. The girl went a little distance away, and the old man told Ruth that she was an escaped slave. Ruth knew because she was a homunculus and a human slave, although they never traveled alone, and something must have happened to her for her to be there. Additionally, she doesn't wear a slave necklace, and Ruth decides to protect her, something heard by the girl, and she is very happy to hear it. The next day, they arrive at the city entrance, and Ruth decides to part ways with them as he is heading elsewhere. The children, before leaving, ask if he wants to join their group because they don't have a strong tank and want to work together. Ruth thanks them for their offer but declines because he has to search for secret treasure. The children acknowledge that they have heard about this and know that the treasure can grant one wish, although the girls also comment that the treasure also provides technology to create homunculi. The three children begin to talk about this. They say they don't like homunculi because they are just simple slaves without feelings, and this starts making the girl near Ruth feel uncomfortable, so Ruth decides to change the subject and bid them farewell. After walking for a while, he introduces himself to the girl and asks for her name. The girl says she doesn't have a name, and Ruth, observing her, decides to give her a fitting name. So, recalling the flower petals called Luna, he decides to name her Luna. The girl hears it and likes the name, so she decides to accept it. After walking all day, they decide to rest at night. After eating something, they prepare to sleep. However, suddenly, 3 wolves appear to attack them out of nowhere. Luna grabs the knife on the ground and quickly cuts the 3 wolves without any trouble. Ruth is surprised and understands that Luna is an illegally made homunculus because she has her own will and feelings, and can even fight and use magic, something other homunculi cannot do. Although illegal homunculi are usually eliminated, Luna manages to escape for some reason. Luna apologizes for ruining the rest of the evening meal, and Ruth asks her if she's so strong, and why didn't she eliminate the snakes. Luna explains that she doesn't have close combat fighting skills, but her ability is magic. Ruth is surprised and asks what those abilities are. Luna says she can enhance her magic power, have support abilities, and also have identification abilities. Ruth is surprised to hear that because she only knows one person in the kingdom who has identification abilities, who died some time ago, which means currently only Luna has that ability because it's very difficult to obtain. Ruth then takes advantage of this opportunity and asks Luna to identify his abilities. The girl says it's okay because it's her job and asks for his hand to do it. Luna concentrates and begins to glow, then says that Ruth has 4 abilities. The first is a provocation, which makes opponents concentrate and attack him. The second is a healthy body, which makes him immune to negative or poisonous effects and enhances his healing abilities. Ruth knows about these 2 abilities but doesn't know the other 2 abilities. Luna says the next ability is Vital Conversion, an ability that allows turning lost defense into physical strength, boosting his statistics. Ruth understands that it is an ability that can be used as an attack and cause damage. Luna agrees and says that as her ultimate ability, she has a sacrifice shield that allows her to absorb damage received by her teammates as if it were her own, and using this ability increases her strength. The more damage absorbed, Ruth realizes that he has indeed been using the ability all along but not understanding it, but now it will be easier for him to use it properly, and he is very grateful to Luna for her help. The next day, they arrive in Bansha, and Ruth feels very motivated. Previously, he was expelled from the group because he didn't know his ability, but now that he knows how strong he is, he will show that he has a lot to offer and that he can be much stronger than any hero because he has a promise to fulfill to his sister. Upon arriving in Bansha, Ruth is greeted by 2 girls, one named Milna, who is the daughter of the village blacksmith, and the other named Phil, who is the second in command of the village army. Ruth asks the girls about the condition of his sister, and they confirm that she is okay. In addition, the entire village has been watching over her while she is away, which makes Ruth feel more at ease because he knows that they did not leave him alone while he was busy. Then, he decides to introduce Luna to them, who is quite afraid because she doesn't interact with others too much. But after talking for a while, she feels more at ease and can talk to the girls. After a while, they arrive at Ruth's house, who tells Luna that they have to be quiet because his sister might be sleeping. But then Ruth smells a very familiar scent because it's the aroma of one of his favorite dishes. So he goes to the living room and sees that Manisha has prepared his favorite dish. Ruth is very excited to see his sister again because she still looks as beautiful as before she left. Manisha welcomes him and welcomes him back home. Then she asks who the girl is, and Ruth introduces them and explains to his sister that he decided to bring Luna home because he found her on the road and because she had nowhere else to go. He decided to help her. Manisha understands and tells them to sit down and eat because she will prepare an extra dish for Luna. Ruth tries to stop her because she is sick, so there is no need to cook more, but Manisha explains that today she feels very good and can do it. Then Luna, curious, asks why Manisha's hair is moving so much. Ruth explains that some people have physical uniqueness and their hair moves according to their mood. He decides to ask his sister if it's because her ability senses that she will return exactly on that day, something confirmed by the girl. And that's why she decided to prepare her favorite dish. She prepared another plate and everyone sat down together to eat. Luna, who was excited, began eating, but Manisha asked why she was using the spoon in such a strange way. Luna felt embarrassed and let go of her spoon, letting it fall to the floor. Then she bent down and apologized to them because she didn't know how to use eating utensils properly since she could only use them a few times, and at that moment, she remembered her past as a slave when she tried to eat with some slaves. Ruth tried to help her, but Manisha approached the girl, then grabbed her hand, and told her that she didn't need to apologize for something so simple. But she gave her a spoon and taught her how to use it, promising that while they were at her home, she would teach her everything she needed to learn. This delighted Luna, and Ruth felt proud seeing how kind her sister was to others. After 3 days, Luna had shared with Manisha and successfully learned many things. She even cooked for everyone herself and impressed Ruth with it because, in a short time, she could cook at the same level as her sister, who greatly valued food and commented that they should take advantage of the good weather to teach the village to Luna. Ruth agreed, and Manisha decided to go look for clothes for the girl, so she brought her a dress and said that she could help her put it on. But Luna felt afraid and took her dress, deciding to go change by herself, making Manisha confused because she didn't know if she had done something wrong. But Ruth knew that Luna was afraid her sister would see the rune and decided not to treat her the same way. After a while, Ruth went out with Luna and explained that in the village, there weren't many things like the Adventure Guild because it was a rather small village and only had a blacksmith and a pharmacy. At that moment, they arrived at the blacksmith's place, which was Milena's father, and when he saw her, he immediately asked if she came to give him grandchildren, hoping there would be more in-laws like that. Ruth introduced Luna and requested before leaving because when she was in town, she lost her sword and it would be very helpful for her to get a new one. The man agreed to make it for her without any problem because it would be like a help and told her that while he worked, she had to look down. Ruth agreed and decided to take Luna there. When they were there, he explained that monster vegetables were plants that eventually turned into monsters. But because they consumed mana, they could be grown in any season, making them suitable for their village. As they talked, 2 annoying kids came up to Ruth asking if Luna and he were dating. But then an old woman came and told the kids to go away and do something better than bothering. Luna then recalled how she had been forced before and made to work with many other children, so she was shocked by the memory. Ruth introduced the old woman as Jiggy, the village pharmacist responsible for providing medicine for her sibling. Jiggy commented that Luna bore a striking resemblance to Manisha and expressed slight regret that her medicine wasn't as potent as hoped, but Ruth said she was very grateful for all her help. Jiggy felt better and asked them to help gather some vegetables. Ruth, Luna, and several other children spent the afternoon collecting vegetables while having fun. As they returned home, Ruth asked Luna for her thoughts on the village. Luna replied that she felt good about its people and was happy to have arrived where she was so loved. Then she decided to be honest and took Ruth's hand, placing it on her chest, and revealed that she had a rune on her chest and that she was not human but made for war in a neighboring country known as Bruddles. She cried and apologized for not telling him earlier because she was afraid that if he knew, he would lose his life. Ruth revealed that he also had a secret because he knew from the beginning what she was because he saw her rune. Luna asked why he decided to help her if he knew she wasn't human. Ruth explained that long before he arrived in the village, he lived with his siblings on the city streets where they suffered a lot. When he found her in the middle of the road, he saw in her eyes the same pain he had when he was suffering, so he decided to help her so she could live as a free human. He said he couldn't be human because he was a homunculus and believed it would be a simple illusion, but Ruth replied that he was also following an illusion because he hoped to find the sacred treasure at the end of the labyrinth, which he didn't know if it was true, but he hoped he could save his sister from her illness with the wish he could fulfill because of that. They both had the same impossible illusion, but that didn't stop him from continuing to believe that one day he would succeed. Luna was motivated to hear that and decided to live more freely and without hiding feelings or secrets, which made Ruth happy, and they promised to be okay from now on. When they arrived home, Luna decided to confess to Manisha that she was a homunculus and apologized for hiding it, which was not strange to Manisha because her sibling was always like that. Deciding to help those unwanted by others the next day, some people from the village gathered to clean up one of the public places. Ruth spoke with Luna, who was very helpful, and at that moment Manisha came in with cold tea for everyone. Luna was surprised to see that all the children wanted to go to Bisha right away, even though Ruth was the first to escape to drink tea for the first time after refreshing herself. Ruth couldn't help but worry about her sibling because she had helped a lot and didn't want her to get worse, but she said she didn't want to be a burden and could also help with some tasks. One of the boys offered a training duel to Ruth because he had returned to the village. Ruth agrees, but they have to do it after he duels with Phil, who is surprised but eventually accepts. After that, they leave the place and prepare for the battle. Ruth is excited because, against her, he doesn't need to hold back and can try out new skills. Phil congratulates and starts the battle, although, for a few seconds, no one moves. Phil is the first to attack and starts striking with her sword. Ruth defends and realizes that the girl is quite strong. Meanwhile, Manisha explains to Luna that her brother and Phil are the strongest in the village, so they could go try out in the towns because of their exceptional skills, surpassing the other children. Ruth is slightly disturbed seeing his sister and failing to seize the opportunity to attack her, which leaves him scratched. Ruth says he'll utilize his skills and loads an attack, his sword glowing, and with one slash, eliminates Phil's shield. It falls to the ground, and Ruth wins the duel. Everyone is surprised to see that Ruth can now use attacking skills, but more impressively, he eliminated Phil's shield with one blow. Ruth tells the girl that he has become stronger over the past few years, explaining that he managed to defeat her thanks to his ability called Vital Conversion, where he uses the lost shield in battle and transforms it into enhanced strength. Although he can't always use it, now he realizes he's very strong because he can turn small scratches into powerful blows. He can no longer defend his shield, which means from now on, he can fight against strong enemies and not just defend as he did before. He can help and fight more. The other children are amazed and approach to ask him some questions, while Manisha looks proudly at her brother, but wonders if one day she could be that strong too. That night, Manisha dreams of her childhood again when she was alone and crying because she didn't see her parents or her siblings, while people commented on her and the fact that they left her because she had an incurable disease. Even they felt guilty because they knew she wouldn't have much time left to live, but at that moment, her brother came and hugged her tightly because he was happy to find her. Manisha wakes up in the middle of the night very surprised and unable to contain her bad feelings because even though her brother always protected her and never left her, she felt that because of her, her brother couldn't be fully happy as he always had to watch her closely. The next day, Ruth goes to greet his sister who is preparing breakfast. He can't look at her directly, which makes Ruth wonder why. At that moment, Luna arrives late to help because she woke up too early. Manisha joked with the girl about how rushed she was, and Luna said she wanted to help because they helped her to have a better life. So she asked why Ruth and Manisha could do so many things. Ruth could fight and had advanced knowledge, while Manisha could cook many dishes and had extensive knowledge of other things. Ruth explained that when they lived on the streets, nobles from the city wanted to help all the youth living in poor conditions, so they enrolled them in the Night Academy, and that's where they learned everything they know now. This reminded Manisha of how other girls talked about her brother and how bad she felt that she couldn't progress because she had to take care of him. Ruth called Manisha back to the present and told her that he would go to the village if she needed something. Manisha said she didn't need anything and that she was fine, but Luna still watched her closely because she suspected it wasn't true. After that, Manisha went to her room and kept thinking about what they experienced at the academy because Ruth was praised by all his friends who spoke very highly of him and believed he would become a very good knight someday. Manisha was proud of her brother's kindness, but as she walked through the academy halls, she overheard some girls also talking about Ruth. They commented on the idea that the boy would become an adventurer to help his sister, something they found regrettable because Ruth would make a very good knight, but because he had to help his sister, he would miss out on a great opportunity. This made Manisha feel bad because she didn't want to be an obstacle to her brother achieving the best in his life. While she was thinking about this, Luna entered the room and asked if she was okay. Manisha answered that she was just remembering some things and decided to ask her what she would do in her situation because she wanted to know how she would treat someone who missed their best chance to have a better life by leaving everything that could have been a happier life just to not leave them alone. without realizing that she could get more if she chose a different life. Luna replied that she didn't know what she would do because no one had ever done so much for her, but she knew that Manisha was talking about Ruth and advised her to speak directly to her brother because if there was anything she knew. Ruth's mind was very different, and that in his heart there was always the idea of helping because even he saved her as an illegal muscle. Manisha felt a little bad because she didn't want to rely too much on her brother, and that's why sometimes she even tried to distance herself a little because she felt that she was just a burden and didn't let him be truly happy. Luna told her again that she should talk directly to her brother because she shouldn't assume that Ruth already knew everything she thought, and it was best to be honest. Manisha felt with her ability that Ruth was back and started to get nervous, but still decided to go and talk to her brother. Although she was very scared, Luna gave her support, and Manisha decided to ask if he was happy with the life he had. Ruth was surprised and answered that he was happy and enjoyed life very much. Manisha didn't understand why he could live happier and decided to ask why he chose to save her when he was in need. Ruth replied that it was the best decision he ever made and he had no regrets at all because without realizing it, he had saved her long before. Manisha didn't understand what he meant. He narrated and Ruth explained that ever since they were children, he always suffered because he couldn't play with the other children. This was because he was very tall and his serious face always scared them. All the children teased and bothered him, leaving him always alone. However, the only one who was always there for him, no matter how he was his sister. Because of this, he decided to leave everything to be with his sister because he couldn't live without the person who always accompanied him and gave him the strength to live. Manisha began to cry because she didn't know how her brother felt. Ruth apologized to her because he thought that his brother was there out of burden or responsibility. Ruth said that he didn't do it because of that, but out of gratitude for all the love his sister had given him. They then hugged. Ruth and Manisha thanked Luna because, thanks to her, Manisha was able to decide to speak up and express all that she felt. At that moment, someone knocked on the door, and Ruth wondered who it was. When he opened the door, he was surprised to see Nin standing there. The girl greeted him and said she had come to visit him because she had a few days off. Ruth was surprised that Kylas had let her go for a few days, but Nin admitted that it wasn't the hero who allowed her to leave because she was no longer part of that group. She even said that there was no longer a hero group because they had all separated. This news shocked Ruth greatly, so Nin explained that they hadn't been able to complete a single labyrinth since Ruth left, because when they fought monsters, they couldn't hurt them. Kylas wondered why his blows didn't have the same impact and now using their abilities consumed more shield. For a moment, they began to understand that Ruth provided them with shields and increased their strength, but they refused to believe this. So, using his strongest ability, Kylas attacked a monster and managed to defeat it, although he had to deliver an extra blow to fully eliminate it. His companions informed him that several portals opened and more monsters came because they couldn't eliminate the monster quickly. Angry, Kylas said that they couldn't retreat because he didn't accept defeat and mistakes. Then, he tried to summon his magical abilities, but he no longer had any magical power. The monster attacked him and destroyed his shield. Kylas fell to the ground and began to feel real pain without any protection, which terrified him because he had hardly ever felt such pain before. He started running, but the monster chased him and struck his back, breaking several of his bones. I will not lie, it was satisfying to see how he suffered because he underestimated our Ruth. Kylas fell to the ground in pain and couldn't move. Meanwhile, he cried in fear because he didn't want to die there. One of his companions saw this and decided to run towards the hero and carry him out of the labyrinth. A few days later, Kylas, wrapped in bandages, read the news, very angry because now his reputation was terrible. Not only had he fled from the dungeon, but he was also injured and blamed the girls for being dodge tanks. Nin said that the fault wasn't with the girls, but with him. He hadn't trained for too long, and he was very thin because he only drank at the guild. Besides that, he only relied on one ability to attack and didn't focus on using others. Kylas complained that at least it had worked until now, but Nin said he should have already known the reason. That ability used his shield to enhance his attack, and when Ruth was with them, even though he didn't know it, he provided protection similar to what he had as a tank. Knowing that Ruth had almost 10,100,000 shields, that's why when Ruth lost his maximum shield, Kylas could unleash his ability with the greatest power he had ever achieved. Kylas was angry because he said he had achieved it himself without anyone's help, and he didn't agree that the group was different just because they lost a tank. An angry Nin said that she had already decided to leave the group, and all the other girls felt the same way and decided to leave him because he only blamed others without realizing his own mistakes. Nin then explained how everything happened and apologized to Ruth because none of the group realized all that he contributed to them since they only saw him as an ordinary tank, and now without him, they realized all that he helped with. For this, she apologized to him, and Ruth said that it wasn't necessary because he didn't fully understand his abilities either, but it helped him because he had improved a lot and now he truly recognized it. Nin then decided to change the topic, and Ruth introduced the two girls. Nin greeted them and said she came from the church to take care of the garden. so it's likely she would stay for some time. Ruth was surprised to hear this and explained that there was no place to stay in this village, so adventurers usually stayed in empty houses. Nin was surprised to hear this, but Manisha decided she would stay with them, so she offered her room. But Ruth explained that Nin was the daughter of a duke and from a high aristocratic family. Besides, they were quite connected to the church, so along with the girl's healing abilities, they considered her a saint. Then Ruth said he would leave his room because it was simpler and she could feel more comfortable. Meanwhile, he would rest in the living room. Nin was happy to see Ruth's room and said she wouldn't mind sharing the bed with him. Ruth felt embarrassed hearing the girl's suggestion. But then they were interrupted because someone knocked on the door and called loudly for Ruth, who went out and saw that it was Phil, who was shouting that the garden was in danger because a monster they had never seen before had appeared. Ruth quickly went out with Nin and Luna. Upon arriving at the garden, they saw that the monster had caused a lot of damage, and Nin used her magic to remove the dark magic layer so they could identify it. Ruth was shocked because he had never seen a monster like this. It seemed that dark magic had completely taken over the animal. Some soldiers attacked but failed, and when the wolf tried to attack them, Ruth decided to use provocation. The wolf started following him, and Ruth asked Nin and Luna to use healing and protective spells while he distracted the wolf. Ruth began to withstand the attacks, and the soldiers took the opportunity to strike, but they were thrown back by the wolf's assault. Ruth absorbed all the damage from them, and the girls used their magic to heal him. Ruth told them not to be afraid to attack because, with his ability, he would absorb the damage from everyone, and they didn't need to worry about losing their shields. The soldiers were impressed with this ability and attacked, causing the wolf to start fleeing. Ruth was worried because the wolf was heading towards the village. Then Luna used her magic to create a stone wall that crashed into the wolf. Ruth decided that this was the moment, as he would use the 20,000 damage points he had received. He leaped towards the wolf and used his vital conversion ability to deliver a blow with his shield. The impact was so strong that an explosion of light erupted, preventing anyone from seeing anything. When the explosion ended, Ruth was worried because his attack was so strong it created a crater in the ground and destroyed most of the garden. Nevertheless, the leader of the soldiers approached Ruth and congratulated him because, thanks to him, they were able to defeat the monster without losing a single person. After defeating it, Ruth was surprised because the wolf was only level C, yet it fought with the strength of a level A monster. He then approached to see what they had gotten from the monster and realized it had 2 magic runes. This was very strange to him because usually they only have 1 rune. Luna commented that the runes were very similar to those used to create homunculi. Nin also observed that the wolf had a scar on its side, as if someone had forcibly inserted the 2nd rune. Ruth realized that someone had intentionally created this monster. Nin said this was very strange because it was known that creating homunculi for combat was completely forbidden. Ruth thought that this might be the work of someone from a neighboring country, as he didn't believe this was just a common experiment. Rather, someone created it with a specific purpose and sent it here. However, for now, they couldn't do much and would just inform the town's owner about what had happened. The next day, Ruth read the newspaper but didn't see much news about the monster that appeared yesterday. At that moment, his younger sister came and asked him to read the news to her. Ruth agreed, and they read about various things. There were rumors that a labyrinth might appear near the village, which would greatly help boost the economy. Ruth also read about Kylas, who had gone back into the labyrinth after recovering from his injuries. Manisha commented that Nin didn't like Kylas because of how he treated Ruth badly. Ruth said that it was true. Then they had a somewhat awkward conversation because Manisha asked if he didn't realize that Nin was interested in him. Ruth admitted that he knew, but he tried not to get involved in romantic affairs because it could end up being too complicated. It would affect his performance as an adventurer and in the labyrinth because he didn't want to take too many risks and he didn't want to make the people who loved him suffer. Manisha responded that he shouldn't think like that and should give himself a chance to be happy. Even so, she hoped that if he found a girl, he wouldn't forget her or distance himself from her. Ruth promised that no matter what happened, he would never let himself be away from her. A few days later, Phil gathered the adventurers and the village guards because a monster had appeared around their area. It wasn't clear how the monster got there, but it was most likely that it had escaped from a labyrinth. So, they had to deal with it. They noticed that Ruth had a new sword, and his shield was now much shinier. Ruth explained to Nin and Luna that the sword was given to him by a blacksmith who made it specifically for Ruth to use. Besides being very good for fighting, the sword could also be enchanted. Ruth could use elemental spells, but since he was a tank, those spells weren't very useful for attacking. However, with this sword, he just needed to send the element to the runes on the sword, and the whole sword would change to the same element, whether it was fire or water, giving him more options to defeat monsters by exploiting their weaknesses. The girls were amazed, but an adventurer mocked him, saying that the sword was too much for someone who was only ranked F. Ruth knew that the young man was ranked C and didn't pay him much attention. Ruth preferred to impress those who thought he was very weak rather than end up disappointing them if they thought he was very strong. Luna was upset by how they treated Ruth, but then Nin commented that it happened because Ruth didn't want to update his rank. If he did, he could even earn the title of Royal Guardian, a saint. The adventurers were surprised to hear what Nin said, and Nin admitted that Ruth always refused to level up. Ruth told them that he didn't want to rank up because the higher his rank, the more often he would be called by the guild, and he knew he became an adventurer to help his sister. As they were talking, they heard a noise from the forest, and the monster appeared behind them. The monster used the ability to become invisible and started attacking them. Ruth ran and used provocation to draw the monster's attention, then ordered the soldiers to attack it. Everyone started attacking it, both the adventurers and the guards, causing damage to it while Ruth held off its attacks. However, he began to feel something strange because the monster didn't try to dodge or attack anyone, but instead acted like a tank like him. At that moment, he understood, but it was too late because two more monsters appeared from behind and attacked several soldiers, then surrounded them. Phil didn't know what to do because there were more of them than expected, and they had no place to go. Ruth encouraged him by saying that he was the leader and they would find a way. After composing himself, Ruth decided to provoke all three monsters simultaneously. The monsters began attacking him while the adventurers worried because facing three monsters at once could be very dangerous. Ruth ordered them to handle one monster, and Luna used her magic to attack, as did the other adventurers, who finally managed to defeat one monster. Ruth endured the attacks from the second monster and decided to use his sword. With his sword enchanted with fire since the monsters were weak to that element, Ruth delivered a single slash, and the monster fell to the ground burning. Ruth let the guards handle that monster, then he turned his attention to the last of the three. Using his shield to block the attacks, he drew the monster's attention while Luna immobilized it with her water magic, and Nin used wind magic to wound it. Ruth seized this opportunity to leap with his fire-enchanted sword and deliver the final blow, successfully defeating the last monster. After the entire battle, the soldiers rejoiced because they managed to win in that manner. They acknowledged that it was all thanks to Ruth. The adventurers also approached to apologize for underestimating him, but now after seeing him fight, they realized how impressive he was, as he wasn't fazed in such a situation. Ruth said that it was natural for them to think that way because adventurers are classified by level, and he understood why they thought he was weak. At that moment, the monsters began disappearing underground, leaving only ruins behind. Everyone was shocked, and Ruth said that it was strange because monsters that disappear like this are usually in labyrinths. Then Nin called him over because she saw an entrance to a labyrinth. This news greatly surprised Ruth. That night, the entire village gathered to celebrate the news about the labyrinth, hoping that with the labyrinth, the village's economy would rise and prosper. Everyone celebrated, but Ruth was not as happy, especially when a drunk soldier approached to invite Manisha for a drink, so he took her away to talk a little. Luna didn't understand why Ruth didn't seem as happy as everyone else. Then Nin came and explained that it was normal because although the labyrinth could bring a good economy, it could also bring problems. If the monsters inside were not eliminated, they would come out like they did that afternoon, putting people in danger. Luna said that's why there are soldiers and adventurers. Nin knew that was true, but it was another problem because with a labyrinth nearby, the number of adventurers would increase, and many of them would try to take advantage of the local girls, so it wouldn't be surprising if some of them were interested in Manisha and Luna. At that moment, Ruth returned and said that the only way to control and prevent such things was with a clan because the kingdom recognized them, and the clans were responsible for organizing the adventurers so they wouldn't be free or independent. This was very concerning to Ruth because he couldn't imagine what would happen if something happened to his sister. Nin said he didn't need to worry because she would try to help him, and as they talked, Phil came over and jumped into Ruth's arms because it seemed the alcohol was starting to affect her. A week later, Ruth was on duty patrolling the streets and preventing fights. Nin joined him and said that many adventurers had come, and the village was growing. As they walked, Ruth was greeted by many people thanking him for helping them over the past few days. Nin was surprised to see Ruth's commitment, and just then, they heard rumors of a fight. Ruth ran over and realized that the ones about to fight were two Ranka adventurers. Each of them was from a different clan, and before they could fight, Ruth intervened and said they were scaring the people. They must respect the people. The adventurers said that he should order one clan to stay and the others to leave. Ruth replied that if they were going to fight each other, no clan would be accepted. When one of his companions tried to attack Ruth in revenge, he stopped him effortlessly and threatened them, saying that if they tried anything again, he would show his strength. Ruth reminded them that if they wanted to show their strength, they had to face him first. The adventurers and their frightened companions apologized for their behavior and quickly changed their minds, now interested in having him be a part of their clan. Ruth refused to join any clan and hoped there would be no more problems with them. Although in his mind he knew that he would have a lot of work because many adventurers were coming, and initially, he wanted to be part of such a clan but couldn't do it while taking care of his sister. Later, Ruth was called to headquarters because they needed him. Ruth decided to go and was received by Buey, who told him that the city lord had talked to them about the labyrinth and gave him two options. The first option was for Ruth to become the clan leader and be responsible for the adventurers entering or leaving the labyrinth, as well as being able to protect the city. Ruth was surprised because it was quite a high position, but he didn't feel he could accept it because his mission was to heal his sister. Will understood, but the people in the city didn't want an outsider because they knew Ruth and had seen his attitude for years. Additionally, he had become an example for the entire city, and they saw him as the best candidate to lead the clan. Will said that if he didn't accept the position, then the second option was to, along with a group of adventurers, be in charge of destroying the labyrinth. Ruth said that it would ruin the city's economy and wouldn't uplift the city. Will knew, but like many other labyrinths in the kingdom, they had become uncontrollable, and instead of helping, they started to harm the city, so these were the two options they had even though he didn't want to choose but had no other choice. He said he didn't have to decide immediately. After leaving headquarters, Ruth kept thinking about it, then saw two people fighting and tried to intervene, but they said a simple adventurer shouldn't give them orders. Ruth knew that to maintain order in the city, he had to become the clan leader. At that moment, Luna came calling him anxiously because Manisha was very weak at home. Ruth ran, and when he arrived at the room, Kyla's was there saying that his sister was fine and just a little weakened. Ruth was relieved to see her okay and then knew what he had to do. If he chose to become the clan leader, he wouldn't be able to leave the city and the chance to heal Manisha would be impossible. Therefore, he gathered Nia and Luna, and after explaining the situation, he asked them to help him destroy the labyrinth because he preferred to save his sister rather than become the clan leader. Luna decided to ask if, as the clan leader, he couldn't appoint someone to be in charge when he was not in the city so that he could go and destroy the labyrinth without affecting the city's leadership. Ruth saw this as an option but didn't trust anyone to take on that responsibility. Luna said that she could take care of it and Nia would agree because she was even thinking of leaving her position as a saint to join. Ruth was surprised to see that both of them were very interested in helping him. Nin said that everyone in the village wanted to help him because he always protected them, so this would be a way to make him better. Manisha also came out of her room with Jigga's help and said that she also agreed because like all the other girls, she loved this village and if there was a way to make the village grow and become better for everyone, then she agreed and there would be no problem because one day she would recover. Ruth was happy to see so many people willing to help him and decided that he would lead the clan, protect his village, and also save his younger sister. The next day, Ruth walked though still remembering what he had talked about with his sister and with Nin. Because of this promise, he was determined to defeat the labyrinth and save his sister while also leading the village. But now he was heading to an adventurer's camp because he received news that his old group was calling him to talk to him. This somewhat surprised him, but he went to find out what they needed. When he arrived at the camp, he was greeted by Lily and his twin brother as well as a knight who came from the church. Everyone introduced themselves, and Luna also did because they didn't know her. Then they invited him into the tent where Kyla's was. Nin was angry to see him and angrily approached the hero because she didn't believe that he was able to call Ruth after all that was said. Ruth calmed her down by saying that he had forgotten everything and then approached the young man asking why he called him because he didn't believe it was to congratulate him on having a new sword. Of course not. Kyla's explained that the day before he was with his group in the labyrinth and met a guard who had consciousness, something very strange because in all the previous labyrinths he had never seen anything like it. This guard turned out to be very strong and agile, causing the wounds he currently had. Therefore, he asked Ruth to continue the mission while he couldn't. Ruth was surprised and Kyla said that he knew what his intention was with that stone, so he hoped he could conquer the labyrinth and save his sister. Now he knew that Ruth was the one keeping his team alive. Ruth was surprised to know this and accepted the responsibility of the labyrinth even though he was told that he would go with Lilia and the others. As he turned to leave, Claus called him because he wanted to apologize for all his bad actions and how he treated him, but now he hoped for the best and hoped he wouldn't lose his life against that monster. As he left there, Ruth went with the whole group to the labyrinth where there was a Baruth rune on the ground. Luna asked in amazement what it was and it was explained that it was a transportation rune that would take them to the first floor of the labyrinth. A few seconds later they disappeared and arrived at a very different place which surprised Luna because there was even a sun. Ruth explained that this was just an illusion and they must not be complacent, although they could not return through the same rune because the rune had disappeared. He explained that to leave, they needed to find similar runes or, in Lily's case, Lily could travel between the labyrinth floors they had previously visited. Ruth also asked Nin to demonstrate the escape ability Nin used. Nin used a mantra that Luna recognized and decided to try, successfully replicating the same mantra on the first attempt, which surprised the whole group, including Ruth and us. At that moment, they felt a strong essence and realized that there were 3 chameleons KKS that would attack them. Then, Ruth organized the team for each to take positions, and he took the front position, provoking one of the monsters while one of the twins and the knight held the other. They all fought together. After a few seconds, they managed to defeat all the monsters. However, from another part of the labyrinth, a guard observed them and was very curious to know who they were. Ruth, along with his group, used the rune to go to the next floor, where they were informed that it was there where they last met the guard. However, at that moment they were attacked by two dinosaur-shaped monsters which they managed to avoid. Ruth was surprised that the monsters were so fast because, in another part of the labyrinth, the monsters were not that fast. He wondered if this effect was caused by the guard. Then, he asked some of his companions to search for magic circles while he would handle the monsters. Nin and Luna went to search, while Ruth and the knight along with Lily fought. The guard observed from a distance how they managed to pass through floor after floor and was impressed with the decisions made by Ruth and us. So the whole group managed to reach the 9th floor, which made the guard happy because he hoped they would soon reach the 10th floor where they could meet. After a while, Ruth rested with his group and decided to thank them for supporting him even though this mission was very selfish. The girls said they didn't mind because they knew he was doing it to save his brother. Then, Nin walked towards the transportation circle and invited Ruth to leave because they still didn't have certainty and had to be together to defeat the guard. Upon reaching the last floor, the atmosphere was much darker. Then the guard appeared, very happy to see them there, and Ruth asked why they had seen him on the 5th floor before. The guard explained that he did not expect the adventurers to be so strong and decided to wait until they were on the last floor because there they did not need to hold back. Then, he introduced himself as Marius, the labyrinth guard, and informed them that he would use his original powers. Ruth quickly reacted to the attack and was surprised because when he held off the attack, his arm hurt because of the power Marius used. Marius was also impressed that Ruth could withstand his blow. Ruth tried to negotiate with him, but the guard refused and only wanted to fight. Then, Ruth told his group that they had to fight with all their might. The twins along with the knight attacked Marius, but they did not succeed in hurting him because he held off every attack, no matter where it came from. Marius praised their coordination and decided to fight with all his might. He gathers his strength, then summons his maximum power and begins to transform into his true form as a monster. Then, he warns that they must use their abilities to escape if they do not want to die. There, Marius transforms into a skeletal form and begins to scream, frightening all present. Ruth is slightly scared, but he remembers that he is here for his brother and decides not to give up on anything. So, he decides to use provocation and starts to withstand the monster's attacks. Meanwhile, Lily uses magic and manages to inflict some damage with her sword strikes. The knight asks Ruth to take turns attacking with provocation so that he does not receive all the damage. Ruth agrees, although surprised, as one direct blow from the monster could end his life. Then, he organizes the whole team and recalls the strategy they agreed upon before setting out because they already knew this would be a long battle. Therefore, they decide to use Ruth's shield to protect themselves, and to wait until Ru loses enough shield so that he can use vital conversion and inflict the greatest damage on the monster. This is their strategy to defeat it. Lily succeeds in attacking and injuring the monster, but she also suffers the consequences. Luna tries to help her, but Nin stops her, saying that they are magic support and that although it is difficult to see their friends suffer, they must be very strong to be able to support them with their magic. Luna understands, and they begin to heal the others. Ruth sees that he has lost 30,000 points from his shield, so he will use vital conversion. He leaps to attack Marius, but Marius spins and attacks him. Ruth does not have time to block the attack, but at that moment Luna manages to protect him with her magic. Ruth thanks her and then takes advantage of the moment to unleash vital conversion. The impact hits the monster and creates an explosion throughout the area. Everyone wonders if the fight is over, but Marius reappears, surprising Nin because the monster is still alive after the attack. Ruth knows that he has managed to injure the monster, so he is confident that one more attack at the same level can defeat it. The monster then begins to summon power runes and creates a giant stone above them to attack the group. Ruth uses his shield to protect them and does not cause much damage, but Lily falls to the ground as her shield is depleted. At the same time, the knight is hit by the monster and thrown to the ground. Ruth approaches him and the knight says that he is okay, but his hands tremble without much strength. Ruth begins to think about what he can do because he is not the type of person to prioritize selfishness over others' lives. So, he decides to order the group to prepare to retreat while he holds off Marius' attack. Nin screams angrily at him for that order, as they cannot retreat after coming this far. Ruth answers that he is the leader of the group and will not risk their lives. Then, the knight appears beside him and says that he knows he made that decision when he saw him lying on the ground, but now he is there ready to fight by his side and if necessary die to achieve the goal. Nin protests while crying that he cannot ask them to surrender. The hero withstands the monster's attack and remembers his younger sister as he promised to save her, and his whole life is dedicated to it. Then he decided he wouldn't give up. Lily decided to join her sister in a fusion and began attacking the monster while the heroes provoked it. Just like knights, while Nin and Luna cared for and assisted them with their magic. The hero decided to use vital conversion and successfully made the monster stagger, but the monster attacked him, and the hero knew that if the attack hit him, it would destroy his shield completely, leaving him unprotected. Yet he decided to let himself be hit by the attack to use the damage as strength and then use vital conversion to unleash his abilities to the maximum, creating a burst of light that struck the monster. After a few seconds, everyone waited to see what would happen. Then they heard Marius laughing because the battle was indeed as exciting as he had hoped, and they had hurt him quite badly. Nevertheless, he was glad to be defeated and permitted to do whatever they wanted, though it wouldn't be settled completely unless they ended his life. The hero approached Marius because that wasn't what he wanted. Instead, he asked if he knew about the secret treasure that could grant wishes. That's what he was looking for because he needed to help someone, and Marius casually pulled it out of his pocket, saying, "Ah yes, here it is," and handed it over. Marius said the stone could perform miracles and just needed to give it direction and voice the wish. After that, the stone would shatter. After explaining, he asked Ruth to end his life. The hero thanked him for the stone and explained that he didn't want to kill him because he wanted Marius to remain the guardian of the labyrinth as it was very helpful to the village inhabitants. Marius was surprised to hear that and delighted because it felt like teamwork, something he accepted because he enjoyed working with strong fighters and hoped to one day have revenge. The hero arrived home and talked to his younger sister. Then he showed her the stone he had tried so hard to obtain. Manisha was surprised to see the treasure and didn't want to accept it because she felt the hero should use it for whatever he wanted. The hero replied that if she used it, the result would be the same because he wanted the best for his sister. Manisha thanked him and began voicing her wishes to the rune, asking for what she desired most in her life. The stone glowed, and after a few seconds, the hero asked if she felt any different. Manisha said she felt more energetic because previously she couldn't move or jump around much due to being out of breath. The hero couldn't bear to see her like that and hugged his younger sister because he had never seen her so radiant and happy. He felt very happy because finally, after much effort, the adventure had succeeded in saving her, as he had even thought he would lose his life before he could save her. Ruth was glad that nothing he had done up to this point in his life was a mistake, and finally, he could see his younger sister in good health. Manisha was very grateful for not leaving her alone and always being there with her. The next day, Ruth received a visit from Marius, who informed him that from that day on, he would be the labyrinth keeper, which confused Ruth greatly. After receiving the news, Ruth refused Marius's offer and dedicated himself to his duties as the leader of the clan. However, these tasks were not easy due to ongoing clashes between the clans in the city. Ruth did the best he could but felt he needed more help. He returned to the location where his clan's headquarters were and spoke with the girls who assisted him to try to find ways to recruit more people. Nin responded that they indeed needed more people due to the shortage of personnel to keep the clan strong. Ruth didn't know who else to ask for help because Manisha handled the administration and all external relations of the clan, while Lily and her twin brother refused to participate or train more people. Although they were the ones who suggested allying with other clans to minimize conflicts among them, to achieve this, they had to offer something in return because other clans would surely want to gain benefits as well. Ruth realized this but didn't know what to offer, which is why he talked to Nin. Ruth explained that for now, his clan only had combat strength, but this wouldn't be of much use to offer to other clans because they needed to start bringing in more participants. Nina then said that he was doing the right thing and should trust him because the clan would grow quickly, even telling Ruth that if needed, she could offer to promote the clan, which would attract more adventurers. However, Ruth immediately rejected that option. At that moment, they were interrupted by Marius, who returned asking Ruth to lead the labyrinth. Ruth said he wouldn't do it for the second time, and Marius decided he would join the clan because he wanted to help stop the fighting in the city. Ruth wasn't sure if Marius was wandering around the city as usual and asked if he didn't hold any grudge against humans. Marius stared at them for a few seconds, causing some tension, but then he laughed and said he had no issues and just wanted to help. Therefore, he proposed that if Ruth took care of the labyrinth, he would help control the fighting and even join the clan. Ruth asked what he should do because he needed help, and Marius was so enthusiastic that he called him to explain the tasks in the labyrinth even though Ruth hadn't agreed to anything yet. Ruth arrived at the labyrinth with Marius. The labyrinth led them through a portal to where they controlled everything. They saw a bed and near it was a well. Marius explained that from this place, they could see all parts of the labyrinth and control what happened inside. Additionally, Marius showed some screens displaying points and explained that with these, they could summon monsters inside the labyrinth. Each monster consumed a certain number of points obtained over time in battle and how many shields they managed to take from the adventurers. The hero was surprised and thought that if he used his shield to be destroyed by the monster, he could quickly level up the labyrinth. Marius acknowledged that it could be a good idea and showed how to summon some monsters. However, the hero reprimanded him because he summoned monsters too close to the adventurers and they were scared. Marius said he could summon various types of monsters and even over time gain their trust, making them help and act on command. There were also other monsters currently locked because they required a lot of points, but they could also summon monsters randomly every so often, so Marius let the hero summon them this time. Ruth touched the screen and a slime emerged from the well, immediately gaining the trust of our hero, making him surprised and thinking that this way it wouldn't be too difficult to get S-ranked monsters because many adventurers only came for dinosaurs. However, if they got higher ranked monsters, the village economy would improve. While the hero was thinking, the commerce slime turned out not to like what was being thought and attacked our hero, throwing him far away. Marius was surprised because this gave them a lot of points, and the hero thanked the slime because now he had a new idea. He told Marius that he would manage the labyrinth, although not at that moment because he had other matters to attend to first. Marius agreed and let the slime accompany the hero because the slime didn't want to part with him. After that, the hero arrived home, and the girls were surprised when he came with the slime, but the hero quickly explained that the slime was friendly and would not attack them. The girls felt relieved and began to observe the slime closely. They were fascinated by how cute it was. Manisha commented that if they were going to keep it as a pet, they should give it a name. The hero agreed and decided to call it Lime, a name liked by the monster and the girls. That night, representatives from the two largest clans in the kingdom rejected the hero's offer to become allies. Some of them referred to the hero's clan as a peasant clan. However, they decided to invite him to be part of a dance party they would hold soon. That same night, the hero told the others about the letters he received from those clans, and as he suspected, they rejected the idea of becoming allies but offered to let the hero join their clan if he provided Nin as compensation. The next day, Ruth and the others arrived in the city. There, Marius was surprised because he had never been in a city with so many people and asked about the flags. Ruth explained that it was their way of representing clan members. At night, they decided to dress up to go to the dance party. Everyone dressed as best as they could to look elegant, and after a while, they arrived at the place and were impressed because it was very large and worthy of the two best clans in the kingdom. There, many people started arriving and soon noticed Nin and found it strange to see her there. Ruth heard comments about Nin being part of the clan that would soon join them, and it made him feel strange, because they did not consider him a leader or try to calm him, and Marius asked if he could eat what was at the buffet. This distracted Hesto a little, and he relaxed with the others while eating. After a few minutes, the lights went out. Then, the sub-leaders of the clans introduced themselves. They thanked everyone who had come and then called a very special guest. The light spotlighted Nin, who was surprised, and she asked Ruth what she should do. Ruth knew that he had to take on the role of leader, so he decided to take her hand and lead her to the front because he wanted to make it clear that she was part of his clan and that they needed to talk to him first. The sub-leader told Nin that they didn't expect to see her as an adventurer because she was very famous in the world and asked who the man with her was. Ruth stepped forward and answered that he was Ru, the leader of the clan Nin belonged to. The host recognized him and asked if he was not part of the hero group because, if he remembered correctly, he heard the heroes say that the tank they had was useless and he himself received several requests for help sent by Claus. Furthermore, he told Ruth that he was the one who suggested to the heroes to remove the tank from their group because it was completely useless. Then he turned to the audience and said that tanks were unnecessary because they were only useful for protection. Ruth felt very disturbed by these comments, and then the host asked Nin if she didn't want to join his clan. The sub-leader of another clan, who was angry, said that he also wanted to make the same offer, and while the two of them were arguing, Ruth decided to intervene because he said that neither of them would get the girl because she was not only part of his group but also a very close friend, and he had no intention of trading her. The host then asked why he came there. Ruth replied that he came to propose an alliance. Everyone started laughing, and some commented that it was impossible for an unimportant clan to want to ally with one of the largest in the kingdom. The host mocked him because he didn't trust a tank, especially if he was the leader of the clan, so he asked Nin if she was sure she wanted to be with them. The girl shouted yes because Ruth was the strongest tank in the entire kingdom. Ruth then felt motivated and took the microphone, saying to everyone that they came to conquer the city's labyrinth. So they could mock or laugh all they wanted, but they would prove that they were much stronger than all the other groups and would make them regret underestimating them because they would go farther than all the strongest members of their clans. At that moment, Go, the leader of the Black Dragon clan, emerged from the shadows and said that he liked the attitude shown by Ruth. So he warned not to underestimate the newcomers and greeted Ruth, who, upon shaking his hand, felt amazed because he sensed the immense power radiating from him as a leader. Go said that if he could conquer the labyrinth, he would consider forming an alliance. Then he threw the microphone into the air, and from the center of the rune emerged Luzel, the leader of the White Tiger clan. He complained about wanting to be there without being seen but explained that he was also willing to consider an alliance if they managed to conquer the labyrinth. Go then said that they had already secured a promise from them and hoped Ruth would keep his word because he didn't want his hopes to be mere illusions. That night at the inn, Marius approached Ruth because of what he had said at the dance party, which was remarkable. Ruth knew the responsibility he bore, and Marius promised to help as much as he could to fulfill the promises they had made. Then he left to spend the whole year, and Ruth met Nin and Luna. The two girls greeted him, and Nin was very grateful for his protection in front of others. Ruth said it was his duty, and besides, Nin was very important to him. The girls said goodbye and went to rest. Ruth reflected that if he wanted to make the city and his clan prosper, he had to conquer a labyrinth that even the two strongest clans in the kingdom couldn't overcome. But for Ruth, no challenge was impossible when it came to his friends and family. At that moment, he was still contemplating what to do when he was called by Lily, who asked him to come into a room. Ruth stumbled and didn't quite understand why he was needed. Then he realized that Lily was struggling with her dress and couldn't tie it. The girl asked for his help, and Ruth, though a bit embarrassed, decided to assist her. After helping, the girl thanked him, and Ruth planned to leave the room. However, Lily asked him to stay because she wanted to talk to him. She knew that Ruth was now the leader of a clan and had great responsibilities, which impressed her. He had progressed far since leaving the group of heroes and now held an important position, something she could never achieve or even dare to say in front of many people. Ruth asked what her dream was, and Lily explained that her dream wasn't as grand as Ruth's. She wanted to be more independent because she had always been under the protection of her twin sister, Lilia, who had always helped and protected her since childhood. But now that they were adults, Lily felt not as strong as her sister and needed to learn to be independent. Even in battle, she only provided support from afar while Lilia fought the monsters directly. Furthermore, when they merged their bodies, Lilia was the one in control because her sister was not only good at fighting but also used magic. Lily felt a bit bad because she never fought alone and always relied on her sister. Therefore, from now on, she wanted to be more independent. Ruth understood Lily's reasons and promised to help her whenever she needed it because he wanted to assist Lily in achieving her dreams. Lily was very happy to know that Ruth would help her, and while jumping for joy, she slipped and fell on top of Ruth. At that moment, her twin sister, Lilia, entered the room after hearing Ruth's voice, and she was angry upon seeing what happened and decided to take Ruth upstairs to the inn. There, Ruth was worried about what Lilia might do to him, but the girl said that he should relax. If it had been someone else she found in that situation, she would not hesitate to make them pay. But she knew him well enough to know that he didn't want to harm her sister. Instead, she acted that way to get him away from her sister and to talk to him alone. Then she asked if he had ever told him their story. Ruth remembered that on one occasion she said that their parents had abandoned them. Lilia replied that this was not entirely true, their parents often abused them, and they suffered greatly from what they experienced at home. So, they decided to run away from there, and since then, they have never been apart. That's why it is very rare to see Lily talking to a man, because it reminds her of their father. Then she told Ruth that this was why she wanted to talk to him, because one day she wanted to take Lily to a place where she would truly be happy, but in the meantime, she was determined to protect her and keep her safe. Ruth said that it was clear, as he had noticed that Lilia protected Lily very well, and his sister spoke highly of the care Lilia provided. Lilia didn't believe it was entirely true, but Ruth said it indeed was, because no one is perfect, and she couldn't expect to be perfect for her sister. Lilia thanked him for his help and for listening to her. Ruth replied that he would always be their friend, so they could count on him whenever they needed him. The next day, Ruth gathered with all the boys and arrived in the basement. There, they were already awaited by the twins, who told them that they could go straight to the 49th floor because they had already explored the basement and managed to reach that level. So, by using the basement's passage, they could get there immediately. Lilia, on the other hand, explained that she had also analyzed the abilities of the other clans and how they formed their groups. Both groups from those clans had the same distribution, which was 4 attackers and 2 support healers. Ruth understood that they did not have tanks, and the attackers took all the damage. Lilia explained that on those floors, there were monsters with negative abilities, which didn't worry Ruth because he had a healthy body ability that would neutralize any negative effects. Nin knew that it would be a difficult labyrinth, but they all believed they could succeed and thus form an alliance with the other clans. Then they entered the labyrinth, and Ruth began organizing the team, advancing as usual while Leela and Marius would be in charge of attacks. Nin and Luna, on the other hand, would assist with magic. Then Lily asked if she could give commands from the back. Ruth agreed because she would have a better view of the battle, and the others were surprised to see that the girl had more authority than before. They then headed to the 49th floor, where they began to sense the presence of several monsters. Marius explained that whoever was leading this dungeon was very intelligent because this floor was designed to attack adventurers from 2 different angles. While they were talking, 2 giant monsters appeared, and Ruth quickly used his ability to draw them in. The monsters began attacking him with poison effects, but Ruth was immune and took no damage. Lily took this opportunity to use her magic and remove the negative effects. Meanwhile, Marius and Leela were eliminating some giant owls, and Leela then suggested that it would be better to quickly pass through the area without continually eliminating the monsters. Ruth agreed and drew some monsters while the others exited the area. Then Ruth used a flash stone that allowed them to pass through that part of the labyrinth. A few minutes later, they talked about what had happened, praised Leela for her decision, and Nin said that she had discovered something new. Now they could choose whether to use the sacrificial shield provided by Ruth or not. This was quite surprising, but Marius said that it might be due to the previous battle that Ruth's skills had increased. Even so, Marius praised Ruth for his excellent skills because not all tanks had the ability to provoke. Ruth thanked him for the praise, and Marius said that it would be much better if he could learn self-healing abilities. Ruth felt strange because he had never heard of such an ability and didn't even know it existed. Marius said that it was true and strange that humans didn't know about it. Wait, humans? Then Marius asked Ruth the same question because they actually didn't know anything about him or where he came from. The other girls also asked the same question because he was now a member of the group and they wanted to know more. Marius decided to tell them even though he wasn't sure they would believe him because he revealed that he was actually a demonoid. As they should know, in this world there are humans and half-humans, but long ago there were also demonoids. To summarize his story to the group, he explained that they were very similar to half-humans, with the difference being that they made promises to the human gods while the demonoids swore allegiance to demons. That's why the demonoids managed the labyrinths, as they were initially created by demons to try to destroy the human world. Nin was surprised to hear this because she believed that the labyrinths were created by their god to enrich humanity and their villages. Lilia said that this is the legend known by many, but Marius stated that it was not true and warned that there might be a demonoid managing the labyrinths. So, they had to be careful when facing it. Ruth asked how Marius felt knowing that he would be facing one of his own kind. Marius replied that he was not comfortable with what the demonoids were doing. Now that he had seen the human world, he strongly disagreed with the destruction the demonoids wanted to cause. So, this battle would be more personal because of his values. Ruth was pleased to hear this because he also considered Marius a friend, and the other girls felt the same. They then started discussing how to defeat the monsters on that floor. After some time, they managed to get through the labyrinth and eliminate all the monsters, reaching the 50th floor. There, they encountered a skeletal dragon, and Ruth initiated the plan he had agreed upon with Lily, where Ruth would draw the dragon's attention while the others attacked from a distance and avoided its strikes. Lance explained to Marius and Lily that it was better to crush the dragon's bones rather than try to cut them, and also mentioned that the dragon was weak against fire, so if they used that magic, the dragon would weaken faster. Ruth continued to fight the dragon while the others dealt damage. But the dragon made an unexpected move and launched an area attack that poisoned Marius and Lily. Nin and Luna began healing them while Ruth kept fighting the dragon. However, after several attacks, the dragon was not responding well to his provocation abilities. At that moment, the dragon launched a mud attack that seeped into Ruth's shield, making it very heavy. But with Luna's help, he managed to remove the mud. Nin knew this would be a very long fight and decided to activate her unique ability, Santa, which created a zone that restored their lost shields. Thanks to this, they continued fighting, and after an hour, they still couldn't defeat the dragon. The dragon was weaker than before, and Ruth knew it. But the dragon began preparing a fire attack that Lily had warned would happen when the dragon had little life left. The girls thought to protect themselves, but Ruth stepped forward and blocked most of the damage with his shield. Ruth taunted the dragon, saying it wouldn't be defeated easily, and then used provocation, successfully stopping the dragon's attack, which had severely damaged his shield. Because of this, he decided to restore his shield in Nin's zone while the other group members attacked one by one using their abilities and magic. After restoring his shield, Ruth jumped towards the dragon and used all the damage he had taken during the fight to deliver a blow with his vital conversion ability, finally defeating the dragon. After the battle was over, the girls suggested that it was enough for the day because they had exceeded their limits and decided to return to the village. Lily said that they could sell everything left behind by the dragon to show that they had gone further than other clans, and Ruth agreed. Then congratulated Lily for leading the group well and proposed celebrating their victory. Everyone was excited, but Leela commented that she wouldn't go because she was very tired and needed to rest. Lily realized something was going on with her sister, so she decided to accompany her while Ruth watched the two sisters leave, knowing something was wrong. Sometime later, Ruth celebrated with Nin and Luna their victory in the labyrinth. They ate there, and Nin drank alcohol, which made Luna curious since she had never tried it before. Ruth was also surprised because he had never seen Nin drink alcohol before. There had been talk of a homunculus being interested in drinking alcohol, but at Luna's insistence, who wanted to try, he decided to let the homunculus drink a little because he didn't believe it would be harmful. However, Luna regretted giving it a big gulp because it tasted very bitter. Nin laughed because it was natural for her not to like it, but she promised that over time and with more drinking, the taste would get better. Then, the girl changed the topic and asked Ruth why he had been closer to Lily and her sister lately. Ruth was surprised by the question, and Luna confirmed it because she had also seen that Ruth was now closer to the two girls. Ruth explained that they were just colleagues and he wanted to thank them for helping without being part of the clan. Nin was pleased to hear that they were just colleagues and asked Ruth if he didn't want the two of them to be more than just friends. Ruth felt embarrassed by the question and thought that the alcohol was starting to affect him. Nin laughed, and Ruth replied that he hadn't thought about it because, as he had said before, he was focused on his mission with the clan and for now wasn't thinking about relationships. Nin understood but hoped that once everything was settled, they could start something. Luna, on the other hand, admitted that she also felt warmth in her chest when spending time with Ruth, so she wanted to get closer to him and have a stronger friendship. Ruth began to feel embarrassed by the girl's suggestions and, after a few awkward moments, decided to go to his room to rest and be alone for a while. However, upon entering, he saw Leela asleep in her bed. No one expected it, but it turned out she was in bed and everyone had been looking for her. How lucky Ruth was, he called the girl and she woke up. Then, she explained that she had come to talk to Ruth but had fallen asleep due to exhaustion. So, she asked what Ruth thought about her sister's attitude in the labyrinth. Ruth admitted that he was very surprised by how the girl could behave and take over leadership, although it should have been something logical because, as twins, they were supposed to have similar strengths, even if not in the same aspects. Leela understood and was happy to see her sister improving, but deep down she felt a little afraid and asked Ruth if the change was good. Ruth replied that it was natural to be afraid of change. He himself also wondered if all the changes happening in his city were good because many of the long-time residents believed that everything would be better if the city were like it used to be and wouldn't have so many problems. However, Ruth also knew that things wouldn't have improved if it weren't for those changes. Leela understood and admitted that deep down she felt weaker than her sister, but all this time she had to be strong and not show weakness so her sister would have great confidence in her. Despite her sister's behavior today, she was proud but also felt a little scared. She feared that her sister would decide to become independent and drift apart, leaving the bond they had built over the years. Ruth said that this wouldn't happen because they were both very close, and no matter what changed within them, it wouldn't be enough to separate them. He was very sure of this, and Leela was very grateful for his advice because she felt much more confident and had no intention of leaving or letting her sister be alone. Ruth wished her the best and finally lay down to rest. The next day, they returned to the dungeon and prepared to journey to the 51st floor. The twins explained that no one had managed to get past that level, and what little they knew was that there was a very thick fog that prevented them from detecting enemies. Then Ruth gave instructions, and they went to that level. Upon arriving there, Ruth and the others realized they couldn't see more than a few meters ahead. Moreover, Lily's detection magic wasn't working, and Ruth asked Luna to use wind magic to try to clear the fog. However, Luna's magic didn't work, and Marius was convinced that it was some kind of mana spell that prevented them from clearing it. So, he proposed detecting the mana source to find the monster's positions. Ruth tried and felt several presences, although he couldn't pinpoint them exactly. He only knew that something was approaching from the front and decided to use provocation. Then, a water attack hit his shield, which surprised him a bit. Then some mud-shaped hands tried to grab them, and Leela said she knew what kind of monster it was. Ruth refocused and sensed several presences. He then asked the girls to move slightly because the enemies were trying to surround them while he used provocation again. This caused the saga monster to appear in front of him, wielding a trident. Additionally, two other monsters emerged from behind, and Ruth managed to block one of the attacks, but as the second monster attacked him, Marius emerged from the ground to defeat it. Thus, after a while, they all managed to defeat the Saiyans together because they used the technique that Marius had taught them, which was to concentrate on detecting monsters based on the mana they used, and they succeeded in passing that level. A while later, they decided to take a short rest, and the girls began preparing food with the meat of the monsters they had defeated. Meanwhile, Ruth checked all the artifacts left by the monsters. Then Lilia approached to inspect as well and told Ruth that thanks to the conversation they had the night before, she felt much better and was able to talk to her sister without any issues. Ruth was glad they were okay, and after eating, they decided to proceed to the next level. When they arrived, they found themselves inside a very large cave, but there were no signs of any monsters. At that moment, a rune appeared on the ground, and from it emerged a dark skeleton. Everyone was shocked, but they were even more astonished when they saw that the skeleton had 3 orbs around it, 1 yellow, 1 blue, and 1 red. This made them feel uneasy, and Ruth sensed a very strong presence emanating from the monster. However, he still decided to initiate an attack as the tank to provoke it while he ordered Lily to lead from the rear. Then, the skeleton focused its attention on Ruth, who attacked it, but the yellow orb activated and created a shield that blocked all attacks. Ruth was surprised and knew that he would not be able to break the shield. As he considered retreating, the red orb activated and unleashed a burst of fire. Ruth protected himself and did not fully understand what was happening. Then, the monster used the blue orb and began moving much faster. Ruth managed to block and dodge the attacks, and he realized that each orb provided a different ability. The yellow orb served as a tank, the red orb used attack magic, and the blue orb was used for support magic. Then, he provoked the monster again, and while the monster faced him, Marius and Lilia attacked from behind. However, the skeleton used a magic shield to block their attacks while stopping Ruth with its two swords. At that moment, the skeleton glowed and launched a blinding light attack. When its effect ended, Ruth asked if everyone was okay, but Marius informed him that Lila was acting strangely. The girl was angry and attacked Marius, ordering him not to hurt her sister. In Lila's consciousness, she had memories of how her father tortured her, beat them, and she tried her best to protect her younger sister even though they were still very small and couldn't do much. Rage took over Lila, who kept fighting. Ruth asked Nin to heal her, but the girl replied that Luna and Lily were also affected. Ruth understood that only Nin, Marius, and himself were unaffected due to their resistance. Then, using Vital Conversion, he attacked the skeleton and managed to disable its magic shield briefly, throwing it against the wall. Ruth asked Marius to handle the skeleton while he tried to protect Lila. Marius complied, and Ruth decided to provoke Lila. Then, he grabbed Lila's hand and brought her to the ground. Lila, lying on the ground, kept screaming not to hurt her younger sister. Ruth recalled what Lila had revealed a few days ago about how their father treated them and understood that she was experiencing a flashback to her childhood. So, he said that they were her friends and no one would hurt them again. Lila began to calm down, and Ruth kept talking, trying to reassure her. The girl saw Ruth appearing in her memory and reached out her hand. By holding that hand, she managed to come out of her confusion. Ruth was glad he succeeded and promised not to let anyone hurt them like before. Lila was very grateful and stood up. Ruth asked Marius to return because Lila was okay now, and Marius explained that they had to eliminate the magic shield in a certain way, otherwise it would be impossible to defeat the skeleton. Ruth planned to attack it, but the skeleton launched another fire attack. Ruth blocked it and asked for Nin's help, who cast a water spell to give him more resistance to fire. Ruth approached the skeleton, but its shield stopped him. Then he saw a drop of water from Nin's spell manage to penetrate the shield and hit the skeleton, so he told the others that this was its weakness because the shield couldn't withstand both physical and magical attacks simultaneously. They decided to try, and when Ruth activated the skeleton's shield, they used their magic to injure it. They began attacking in different ways, successfully weakening it little by little. Nin, Luna, and Lily used their magic to trap it with 3 different elements. The skeleton tried using its magic again to confuse them, but Nin cast a spell to prevent it. She realized that the yellow orb was shining too brightly, meaning the monster would try to create a large barrier to escape. Ruth ran towards the monster, determined not to let it do that, and Nin warned him that he would take damage from the spells. Ruth replied that he would use that damage to apply it in his Vital Conversion attack and successfully slammed the skeleton into the wall. The monster began to weaken but used a spell to create clones. Now, the 2 skeletons attack Ruth, who asks Marius and Lila to handle one of them. Luna assists them with her magic, and together they manage to defeat the clone. Ruth pursues the other skeleton as it tries to flee, attacking it with his shield, gradually breaking the skeleton's magical defenses. He then calls on Marius and Lila for a final strike. The 2 children comply, successfully defeating the monster, which dissipates and leaves behind a gem on the ground. Ruth picks it up, delighted that they have overcome the boss at this level. He asks Lily to find the portal out of there, but she returns surprised to report that there is no portal. Confused, Ruth asks Marius if he understands what is happening. Marius, too, is unsure about the Labyrinth Keeper's intentions but suspects that the skeleton was its finest creation. Now defeated, the Keeper might fear them, possibly explaining why it blocked their way forward by obscuring the moon. Though Ruth doesn't fully grasp why it did so, he suggests they may need to find another route through the underground journey. Suddenly, a girl appears behind Ruth, commenting that they shouldn't leave so soon because there's still much to be done. She bites Ruth's neck and disappears. Moments later, she reappears before them, exuding immense power. 4 more skeletons materialize around them, causing concern as they cannot combat so many at once. The girl, angry that more skeletons appeared, swiftly destroys all 4 with a single attack. Ruth becomes more worried, realizing she possesses overwhelming power. Unexpectedly, he learns that the Labyrinth Keeper is actually a demon king. The Keeper casts a curse, but thanks to Nin's protection blessing, they remain unaffected. The Keeper grows slightly angry, especially when Ruth shows no fear. Ruth remarks that he actually finds the girl quite cute, which amuses her greatly. Marius warns Ruth that despite her appearance, the girl is actually over 300 years old. Enraged, the Keeper attacks Marius with magic, but Ruth shields him, emphasizing that Marius is his friend. The girl was surprised and told Marius that it was ironic because the failure of the Demon Kings eventually allied with humans. Marius replied that he hated the Demon Kings and that's why he didn't support them. The girl disregarded what was said and reminded them that no one could match the power of the Demon Kings. Ruth replied that it was indeed true, and perhaps humans didn't have enough power to defeat them individually, but that was because they were a group, and in this way ordinary humans managed to defeat the entire labyrinth. The girl was not surprised by what Ruth said and challenged him to try to defeat her, Guardian Ammon, and show how brave he was. The girl's body began to radiate a lot of mana and her power increased. Luna realized what was happening and started to feel afraid. Ruth decided to step forward first and use provocation. The Guardian attacked him and Ruth managed to withstand its attack. Then everyone else from the group tried to attack it one by one, but the girl was so strong that they couldn't harm her. Moreover, she easily dispelled their magic. Ruth was surprised to learn that his provocation ability did not affect her as the Guardian attacked the others. They tried again, but the girl mocked them because they wouldn't be able to hurt her that way. Nevertheless, Nin managed to make her stumble after dispelling the wind magic. Ruth then devised a plan and used provocation again. At that moment, the girls used fire attacks to strike her from behind, while Ruth threw glittering stones that blinded the Guardian. Marius and Lily seized this opportunity to cut it with their swords. The Guardian began to emit excessive mana and its power broke free in the form of a tornado. It was furious for underestimating them, but now they would know its true power. Ruth and the others gathered around Nin, who used healing spells on them. They discussed the Guardian and realized that it would be more difficult to defeat it compared to any other monster they had faced. Nevertheless, everyone was motivated to defeat it because they were not just an ordinary group. Marius said that this would be the perfect opportunity to defeat the Demon Kings, and everyone promised to give their best to defeat the Guardian. At that moment, the tornado disappeared and they saw a giant Fenrir that with just one roar disturbed the entire group. Ruth was amazed and asked Marius if he could also transform into such a beast to fight. Marius replied that he could, but wouldn't be able to distinguish between friend and foe. Ruth understood and stepped forward to face the wolf's attack, while Marius and the others tried to harm them, but even though they tried to cut or cast various types of magic, they couldn't hurt Fenrir even with a scratch. Ruth continued to use provocation and withstand increasingly fierce attacks, so they knew she would be harder to defeat than any monster they had ever faced. Nevertheless, everyone was motivated to succeed in defeating it because they were not just an ordinary group. Part of them believed that this was the perfect opportunity to eliminate the Demon Kings, and everyone promised to give their best to defeat the Guardian at that time. The tornado disappeared and was replaced by a gigantic Fenrir, whose roar alone managed to unsettle the entire group. Ruth asked Marius if he could also transform into such a creature to fight. Marius replied that he could, but he wouldn't be able to distinguish between friend and foe. Ruth understood and moved forward to confront the wolf's attacks, blocking the strikes directed at him, while Marius and the others attempted to harm it. Despite their efforts with various types of magic, they couldn't scratch Fenrir. Ruth continued to use a provocation strategy to deflect increasingly powerful blows while trying to devise a plan. However, Marius then appeared after concentrating for a more deadly attack. This time, he managed to wound the wolf, causing it to flee and leaving Losos confused. Nin decided to cast a spell to prevent confusion from the roar and asked Ruth to protect her. Ruth agreed, and together with Lily and Marius, they began to attack the wolf. They succeeded in gradually injuring it, and Ruth noticed the wolf starting to slow down, which was a good sign. At this moment, runes on Fenrir's head glowed, creating a protective wind around it. Marius didn't notice and attempted to attack, but was thrown back with great force. Ruth understood it was a protective shield activated to minimize damage, and believed that disabling it would increase their chances of defeating the monster. Nin mentioned a spell to remove the shield but said it would take time. Ruth and the others agreed to give her the time she needed, and they began to divert the wolf's attention. It was tougher for Ruth, who also had to endure the damage caused by the wind shield on his body, finding it difficult to breathe. However, he was determined to stop the attacks. After a few minutes, Nin completed the spell and deactivated the shield. At that moment, Marius and Lilia took advantage to inflict wounds in several places. Ruth ran beneath the wolf and used orbital conversion to restore over 30,000 points of damage he had taken earlier. But the monster began to rise, and magical runes appeared beneath it. Ruth saw it was preparing a magical attack but knew he had no time to escape, as the attack was incredibly powerful. He resolved to defend himself while his shield was deactivated, fearing that losing it could even cost him his life. Moments later, the attack ceased. Nin and the two girls approached him, and at that moment, they saw Marius and Lilia lying on the ground, both severely injured but still holding on. Even so, they could not fight much longer, and Fenrir stood before them once again. Despite being severely injured and not having much strength left, Ruth asked the girls to use their magic to help Marius and Lilia while he tried to continue fighting. Nin was worried about Ruth because he had no shield for protection, but he reassured her that he could still use his abilities. So, he had to give it a try. He began to withstand the attacks, but without the shield's protection, the blows felt much stronger and as if his bones were being pierced. Despite this, Ruth did not think of giving up. However, he noticed that the wolf started to prepare a wind spell. This made him afraid, but the monster was unable to cast the spell because it was also too weak. Ruth felt somewhat relieved, but he knew that he wouldn't be able to harm it in such a condition and thought that he should retreat. Then Lily said that they should not give up, so she asked Nin and Luna to cast spells while she would stand at the front with Ruth. She would do it by joining her sister because they had to take advantage of the monster's very weak state. Ruth was a bit worried, but he decided to trust her and promised to protect her. He began to withstand the increasingly painful attacks. Although he was hit and received wounds, Nin healed him while Lily, combined with her sister, started fighting the wolf. Ruth intervened just as she was about to be hit and said that although she had the same movements when her sister controlled the body, her attacks were very predictable and thus the wolf avoided them. Lily apologized because she rarely controlled the body, and Ruth asked her to fight as she knew, not trying to match her sister, but in the way she felt she should, while he continued to protect her. But each time, he felt more pain in his body until his head hurt badly and he felt his strength draining. Ruth wondered what he could do and remembered that he was the one who brought them there, so he had to endure as best he could, even if it meant fainting from the pain. At that moment, he saw Marius and remembered that he had managed to create a shield with his mana, so he thought that if he could use that technique, he could last a little longer. At that moment, he was attacked by Fenrir, and without time to think, he tried to use the technique, successfully creating a shield just in time to avoid injury. This surprised him but also made him happy. He then decided to use more mana and created a stronger shield, which made him feel better and the pain in his body started to disappear. Additionally, his movements became faster and he felt more energized. The wolf began to attack faster, wanting to finish them off, and Ruth started to distract it. Then he gave an order to Lily, who appeared from behind the monster and with her sword created a burst of magic. Ruth was surprised to see Lily using magic. Lily used her sword by combining elements to create a barrier that prevented the monster from moving. Then, Lily charged her sword with 4 elements and, using all her magical power, she attacked Fenrir, piercing him while the 4 elements created a powerful explosion that destroyed the monster's form, revealing the true form of Diana's guardian. Exhausted, Lily fell, but Ruth managed to catch her and thanked her for everything she had done. However, Lily reminded him that they were a team, and it was thanks to their cooperation that they managed to defeat the enemy. Ruth let Lily rest and decided to speak with the Guardian. The Guardian thought Ruth would deliver the final blow, but Ruth wanted to know a few things first. So, he asked about the rune that could grant wishes, and the Guardian gave it to him without hesitation. Then, Ruth asked if there were more demon kings and what their plans were. The Guardian replied that there were many demon kings, but he didn't know the exact number as he wasn't very close to them. Additionally, many demon kings planned to destroy the world, which was why there were so many indestructible labyrinths. However, in his case, he just enjoyed fighting strong warriors. Even so, he admitted he was very surprised to be defeated. Ruth was glad to know that the Guardian's intentions weren't too bad and made an offer for him to join his group. Ruth planned to defeat all the demon kings threatening his world, and to achieve that, he needed the strongest in his team, and the Guardian would be very helpful. The Guardian suggested it would be better if he became his servant so he would have to obey all his commands. But Ruth replied that he didn't force anyone, and if the Guardian wanted to be part of his group and fight strong enemies, it had to be of his own free will. The Guardian chuckled at Ruth's attitude because he had never met a human like that, but he eventually decided to accept the offer. Ruth was happy to know that he was now part of his group, although he felt a bit uncomfortable when the Guardian asked him to carry him that night. Ruth, along with his group, announced their victory in the city's labyrinth in a ceremony. In return for the map of each floor and information about the monsters, Ruth requested an alliance between the clans. The leaders of both clans accepted the offer because of a promise they had made earlier, and Ruth happily decided to return to his city. However, they did not inform the other clans that they had recruited the labyrinth's guardian. The next day, while traveling by carriage, Lily woke Ruth up. While everyone was resting, Lily once again thanked Ruth for everything he had done in the labyrinth because thanks to him and the words he had said, she became much stronger. As a token of gratitude, Lily gave him a kiss on the cheek, which surprised Ruth. A few days later, they returned to the city and Ruth gave the rune to Manisha to use as she wished. Manisha used it and felt better than ever, then thanked the Guardian for the stone. She promised to provide all the food the Guardian wanted to make him feel comfortable there, which made the Guardian very happy as he greatly enjoyed human food. After a few days, Ruth spoke with his sister, who read out some requests from the villagers. Many of them complained about the adventurers and the condition of the roads. Manisha handed these requests to Ruth for him to read and then continued with her work. Ruth felt better seeing his sister full of energy, but he started reading all the requests. Knowing that they still had many problems to solve in their village, Nin suddenly came asking for help with a girl who had fainted. They approached, and Luna took responsibility for healing her with her magic. Our hero saw that the girl was a homunculus, and a few seconds later, the girl woke up. As soon as she woke up, the girl jumped to Luna and begged for help because her friends were in danger after being attacked in the forest. Nin proposed to leave immediately, and our hero agreed, asking Luna to stay with the girl to make her feel safer. Our hero ran through the forest and approached the labyrinth he controlled. However, he didn't believe that his monsters had escaped from the labyrinth because he hadn't given them permission. When our hero arrived at the place where some homunculi were fighting each other, he and Nin stopped, not knowing which side to help. Then, they found that there were two factions. One group appeared more frightened while the other acted like robots. Our hero protected a girl who was almost attacked and told her that her friend went to seek help. He asked what happened and why they were fighting. With a bit of fear, the girl confessed that they were homunculi from Brunes, but the others were combat homunculi specially designed in the city, meaning they came from the same country as Luna and only followed their leader's orders, so they had no feelings or free will compared to them. Our hero asked Nin to heal the others while he thought about what to do because although they were homunculi, they might be like Luna. But now he knew he had to defeat them and began to defend with his shield from their attacks. At that moment, Ammon arrived and told him that although they seemed alive, they were actually like dolls. Our hero then cut off one of the homunculus arms, but it didn't stop, and the homunculus continued to attack. So our hero knew he had no other choice but to eliminate them by cutting their runes. With his sword, he began eliminating all those who attacked him, and in a short time, he managed to defeat them and make them disappear. After that, he went to see the others and explained that their friends were at their clan's house. If they wanted, they could go there, but he knew in his mind that it wouldn't be easy to convince them because they looked at him with suspicion, which he already expected since they might have gone through many bad experiences. The girl who spoke with our hero earlier asked if there wouldn't be any problems when they went because they didn't trust humans much, but many of their friends were hurt and weak, so they had no other choice. Our hero promised that they would feel better there, and after a few hours, all the children were at the clan's house, eating and relaxing, even some of them talking a lot with Luna. Nin asked Ruth what they would do now because they couldn't accommodate everyone there as the villagers would start gossiping. Besides, they had to talk to the city leader to inform what happened in the neighboring country. Our hero is convinced that this leader will help resolve the situation. And then a girl named Fair wakes up to tell our hero that she will accompany him because she knows that he will be speaking with someone important in the village, and she believes it would be better if she could speak for her friends. Our hero warns her that it will not be easy and she might be judged for who she is, but the girl does not mind and is willing to go, promising to share as much as she can. To help her friends, after a while, they go out and people start gossiping when they see Ruth with the girl. They wonder if she is a homunculus or what she is doing with Ruth. Ruth apologizes to her for what people are saying and explains that in his village they have never seen a homunculus, which is why they are reacting this way. Phil reassures him by saying that they were prepared for this because when they left their country, they knew they would face situations like this. They then continue their journey and arrive at the city leader's place. There, they explain the entire situation, and the leader thanks them for telling the truth. He knows that homunculi have suffered quite a lot and does not believe that the neighboring country did this because he only heard some rumors, but thought they were not true. Ruth asks if they can protect the homunculi in their city, though the leader does not know how to protect them all. Ruth explains that they can work like ordinary people. This would help because the city needs more labor now since there are many adventurers. The leader knows this is true, and after seeing Fair, he realizes that they are almost like humans in the way they think and express themselves. Then he asks the girl how the Brunels could create such advanced homunculi. The girl replies that all of this is because 20 years ago a demon king named Grit appeared in the city. She does not know how the demon king appeared, but since his arrival, the technology to create homunculi has greatly advanced. Now the demon king is creating more homunculi like him, also creating various types of homunculi. The city leader is very grateful for this information and tells them that he will speak with the royal capital so they are aware of this situation. He also promises Fair that their city will protect all homunculi and treat them like ordinary people. On the way out, Ruth talks to the girl who is happy to be accepted in the city. Then Ruth asks about the girl she protected while they were fighting. The girl explains that the girl is their leader and a very good fighter, although she does not like to socialize much. Like the others, she does not particularly like humans. However, now with Ruth, they realize that not all humans are bad and they can live a little better. When they return to the others, Ruth explains that now they will stay in the city and can work. He then asks what they can do or where they have experience. They say that they do not know much and have little knowledge, only knowing how to cook, make clothes, make weapons, and build an entire village, but nothing more than that. Ruth is surprised to learn that they know a lot of things and understands that they were forced to work. Seeing their concern because they believe they will be forced to work again, He explains that here they will work with rest time and only a few hours. They are surprised to learn that they can work a little, and Ruth says that the work schedule has not been confirmed, but he does not believe it will be very demanding. He also thanks them for being willing to work, which surprises the homunculi because they have never received thanks for their work. Ruth then gathered with Nin and Manisha, where they agreed that the best course of action was to start by building public baths because many adventurers had an unpleasant odor, which had become one of the complaints in the city. Manisha went to submit the proposal to the city leader, while Nin asked Ruth if he was aware that Luna was very different. Since the homunculus arrived, she had been very close to them and hardly spent any time with the other clan members, as if she felt connected to them. Ruth knew he couldn't tell Nin the truth about Luna and decided to look for her. After a while, he found her in the fields and approached her to talk. He then asked why Luna was so close to the others and if she had told anyone that she was also like them. Luna explained that she was just curious and wanted to know more about her origins. Besides, she denied telling anyone because she didn't want to cause problems for Ruth. She felt very fortunate to be protected by Ruth, who was glad to see the girl feeling good and knowing that she could reveal her identity to others. However, Luna had no intention of doing so until people no longer feared the homunculus. That way, she could truly be happy. After talking with the girl, Ruth decided to go speak with Ammon, who greeted him very enthusiastically. Ammon shared that he was now teaching the young children in the village about magic, hoping that some of them might one day become great wizards or even demon kings. Ruth took this opportunity to ask what Ammon knew about the demon king, Grit. Ammon admitted that Grit was someone very obsessed with research. Ruth explained that the homunculus were his creation, and Ammon was not surprised because Grit had long sought the ultimate power, although he had never achieved it. So, he might be experimenting with the homunculus as a hobby because the demon king cannot die and needs something to pass the time. Ruth was furious to learn that the suffering of the children created by Grit was just a hobby for him. Ammon explained that the ultimate power Grit sought would not come from the homunculus because that power actually belonged to Ruth, who could level up thanks to the demonic power of mana and also had the magical power of a shield. Ammon discovered that Ruth could master this power because he used it during their fight. Ruth then asked if Grit was in one of the labyrinths, as he planned to defeat him. However, Ammon warned that Grit was not a weak person and his experiments made him very dangerous. In those labyrinths, the monsters consumed mana, and if Ruth didn't know how to use it, he would be eaten by them and become one of them. However, Ammon also told him that if Ruth could learn to use mana perfectly, he could even become a demon king. Ruth refused to be interested in becoming a demon king, and afterward, Ammon left because he had to teach. Ruth continued walking, thinking that he had to become very strong if he wanted to defeat Grit. His thoughts started to spiral out of control with anger, and he heard a voice saying that he must get rid of it. Our poet was shocked and tried to find out who said it, but he was even more surprised when he saw that there was no one nearby who could have spoken those words. After a few days, the construction of the public toilet was progressing very well thanks to the hard work of the children who worked with great rhythm and high enthusiasm. Although at first, some people felt uncomfortable seeing so many homunculi, they gradually started to get used to it. Some even admitted that they had done a good job in the city, so everything was going well. Meanwhile, our hero trained in using his mana in the labyrinth because he had to learn to control his power well if he wanted to defeat Grit. He also knew that the Demon King would try to kill him to gain his power, so he had to prepare himself as best as possible, even though he knew he still had a lot to learn. Then he decided to return to Nin and Lily who, along with Marius, had obtained a baby monster and fairy. They thanked our hero for allowing them to use points to get their friends. Meanwhile, Marius was a little jealous because the monsters in the labyrinth preferred Ruth, something that did not happen when he was in charge. After a few days, they arrived at the opening of the public toilet. Our hero saw that there were still people who felt a little uncomfortable with the fact that the toilet was built by some homunculi. However, there were some adventurers who were eager to enter, and together with them, our hero decided to go in and be the first to enjoy it. Meanwhile, the girls also went in to enjoy the bath. Although they did not understand why Luna did not want to join them and thought that Luna was shy because there was nothing to cover herself with, they still enjoyed the bath together and joked around. Meanwhile, Manisha watched them with great joy because it had been a long time since she could share with people so close and feel so good. While they were talking, they heard voices coming from the men's bath and found it strange that they were shouting so loudly. However, the adventurers were apologizing to our hero because they just wanted to make a small hole to peek, but our hero did not allow it because his sister was also there. He asked Marius what he was doing trying to peek. Marius admitted that he was not interested in seeing the girls, but he really liked the tense atmosphere that had formed. Our hero couldn't stand it when one of the boys said that he wanted to see Manisha, and he jumping to strike it. Meanwhile, the girls listened to the debate about who was better, especially when our hero told the children they should be content with just imagining it. Our hero spoke with a few people who were still a bit worried, but they were surprised to hear how well the adventurers spoke about the public toilets because they had hot water and soap. This piqued their curiosity, and they decided to give it a try. Meanwhile, the girls came out and were not very happy after hearing the comments made by our hero. Just then, Marius arrived and said that imagining it was a good idea, which made them even more upset. However, after a few days, people were more confident, and the distance between them and the homunculi had significantly decreased. Then, our hero went to congratulate the children on their good work. At that moment, he received a notification from an adventurer that a horde of monsters was heading towards the village. Our hero immediately went to the clan hall where all the adventurers were gathered. With the information he had, he asked them to be strong because they would face a large wave that the guards couldn't handle. Therefore, the Adventurers Guild would reward those who managed to kill the most monsters, and it was their responsibility to protect the town. However, they had to remember that they were not weak, because their clan was the only one that had conquered the labyrinth in the neighboring town. After the speech, the adventurers became motivated and went out to fight. Meanwhile, Ruth talked to the girls about what they would face, although he was confident they would be fine. Marius and Ammon arrived and said they believed they knew where the wave came from, thinking it originated from a new labyrinth producing so many monsters that it was now sending them out in waves. Ruth was surprised that this happened, but he knew they had to protect themselves. Then, the young men who had been previously protected by Ruth came to help, wanting to repay the favor. Ruth accepted the help because any assistance was valuable. Together, they headed to the front of the town. After some time, they managed to build some defenses and got ready. Then they saw the wave approaching, and some were scared because the number was more than 300. Ruth encouraged them, and the mages and archers began to attack, taking down some monsters. However, they saw that the goblins could also use magic, launching spells that frightened some adventurers again. At that moment, Marius arrived with two twin girls who had joined forces. Ruth was happy to see them and decided to be the first to strike, successfully provoking all the goblins. He used his mana to enhance his abilities and managed to defend himself even when attacked from behind. However, Ruth had mastered his mana so well that he could detect anything around him, which impressed Nin and Ammon, who didn't expect him to be that strong. Then all the adventurers and clan members started eliminating the monsters, managing to defeat them all in a short time and were amazed by Ruth's resilience and strength. Nin returned Ruth's shield, who still thought there were more monsters in the newly created labyrinth. At that time, an adventurer reported that more monsters were approaching and that the second wave was imminent. Everyone was terrified, but Ruth asked them to believe that they would win, no matter how difficult it was. At the same time, the adventurer returned, shouting that more monsters were coming, and from another side, monsters from the Avantia labyrinth were also approaching. All the adventurers were scared because they were surrounded, but the monsters kept advancing and started fighting against the others. This surprised them, and Ruth knew that reinforcements had arrived, because with the fairy girls, he had given them a mission to duplicate the monsters from their labyrinth to come and help. So, with them, Ruth began the second attack, successfully provoking the ogres while his allied monsters didn't let them get hurt. This surprised all the warriors as they had never seen anything like it before. After some time, they managed to win thanks to Ruth, who received all the praise from both the homunculi and the adventurers. However, many people also came to thank everyone who had protected them from the attack. Ruth spoke with Ammon, who acknowledged that he had fought well and that bringing monsters from their labyrinth was a good idea. But Ruth said they must focus on conquering the new labyrinth because the next wave of attacks could come unexpectedly. Ammon agreed because he could do it again and acknowledged that this new labyrinth must be Grit's work, as he felt his mana nearby and it wouldn't be strange if he was behind the attacks with those monsters. Ruth was furious when he found out that Grit was the mastermind behind all those attacks, and his mana began to unleash, while the other Ruth became more determined, saying they had to go conquer the labyrinth. Ammon asked what he would do after defeating Grit and whether he would recruit him to the team. Ruth didn't feel it was the right thing to do because Grit had done many terrible things, and the homunculi also didn't want him near them. Then Ammon said there was an option and showed two bracelets capable of suppressing the abilities and power of a demon king. That would be very useful. Ruth thanked him, and Ammon replied that he did it because he liked living in this village and didn't want to leave so soon. Marius, on his part, told Ruth that they should go immediately, but Ruth asked Marius not to come along because knowing what Grit had done, he would most likely continue sending attacks to the city. So, Marius, as the deputy leader of the clan and a friend of the adventurers, had to stay and protect Bancha. Moreover, the monsters would understand his orders and needed someone they trusted to protect their home while he was away. Marius agreed to help because he also wanted to stay in this city, and Ammon promised to help with his magic. Ruth thanked everyone and told Ceponime to come along because he saw that Ceponime fought very well. Then he explained to all the warriors and adventurers that he would go to conquer the labyrinth with his group. So, he asked them not to be afraid anymore and to defend the city with all their honor. After walking for a while, Ceponime asked if they would meet Grit in the labyrinth. Ruth replied that it was very likely and asked if Ceponime knew him. Ceponime replied that all the homunculi knew Grit, and Ruth asked her not to push herself too hard while Luna remained silent after hearing those words. The whole group managed to enter the labyrinth but arrived in a room that seemed empty. This surprised Ruth as he didn't see any monsters at all. Then he asked the girls to detect any presence. However, they revealed that there wasn't a single monster near them, and there was also no door to another floor. Ruth was puzzled that this was the only floor. Then he felt a strong mana presence. A portal appeared in front of them, and Grit came through, introducing himself and asking them not to be too harsh on him. After the introduction, Grit felt it was unnecessary because they already knew him. Ruth ordered him to close the labyrintho, or they would end his life. Grit laughed at this, saying it wouldn't happen. Ruth said they had already defeated the monsters he had sent, and now it was Grit's turn. But Grit just laughed and showed an even larger army of monsters heading toward the city. Ruth became angry and tried to approach the Demon King, but someone held him back to calm him down for a moment. Ruth eventually calmed down and told the demon that his monsters wouldn't be able to destroy the city, but Grit was confident they could because he had nearly unlimited points, and it was only a matter of time before they all fell. Ruth said he would defeat Grit first, but Grit just laughed, ignoring him. Then he spoke to Luna. Grit was very curious because there were 2 homunculi in their group. Luna stepped forward, surprising all the girls because no one knew about that secret. Luna apologized and told Grit that there was nothing wrong with being a homunculus, but the Demon King was delighted because she had progressed significantly compared to all the other homunculi. He was amazed by what she had learned in the outside world. Therefore, he proposed that Luna return with him, but Luna drew a dagger, refusing because her only master was Ruth. The girls asked why they hadn't been told before, but they waited for a good answer while protecting Luna. Then Grit, in a very epic manner, removed his glasses and transformed into his original form, stating that he had to claim what was rightfully his by force. He then attacked Ruth quickly, who was shocked by the power of his attack, but with increased mana, he managed to push him away. Lilia tried to attack, but Grit dodged her. When Ceponime tried to attack him, Grit blocked her attack and then struck her down to the ground. Ruth went to check if she was okay, and she got up while Lilia continued to fight Grit. The girl said she protected him with her shield, but there was no need to waste it on her because she was just a homunculus and it didn't matter if she got severely hurt or even died. Ruth was shocked to know she was willing to die to help them and then asked her not to fight because he wouldn't accept anyone dying. Unlike Grit, who used them as tools and didn't care what happened to them, he needed brave warriors who understood their importance, didn't feel like a burden to the group, and whose deaths wouldn't matter. If she decided to see it this way, then she could fight. At that moment, Grit cast a spell that Nin and Lily stopped. Then Ruth used provocation to distract Grit for a moment so that Ceponime and Lilia could attack him. Grit was overly confident in his magic, but Luna used a spell to temporarily nullify his magical powers, allowing them to wound him. Ruth quickly cuffed Grit to seal his magic. Grit screamed in rage while an adventurers and soldiers struggled to fight off the numerous monsters. However, Hero Kylas arrived and motivated the adventurers to keep fighting and show their bravery. This surprised all the soldiers while Marius also displayed his abilities. The wizards managed to convince Ammon to fight by promising him plenty of food as a reward. He became very excited and created a giant tornado, which even made Ruth worried as it could damage the city. Then Ruth saw Grit on the ground and found it strange to see a gem on his chest because it did not belong to the Demon King. At that moment, he felt a very strong power coming from the portal and attacking him. Ruth managed to hold it off for a moment but had to redirect the attack due to its immense strength. From that magical field emerged another Grit who mocked them, saying that the one they had defeated was a replica of himself, albeit with his memories and some of his abilities. So it could be called the real Grit but was actually a homunculus with much lower power compared to himself. Grit then transformed into his true form and regretted that they wouldn't last long. Then he launched a spell with one finger that hit Ruth and threw him several meters back. Ruth, slightly dizzy, decided to use a substantial amount of mana to increase his strength and attack the Demon King, but the Demon King vanished in an instant and then struck him from behind. Ruth fell to the ground and shielded himself as he saw Grit preparing to attack him again. Then Nin created a magic rain that forced Grit to move from that spot. The twins decided to fuse and then attack Grit, who dodged their sword strike despite being hit by their spell. Ceponime tried to attack again, but Grit easily dodged without any trouble. Then Grit began to shout, further increasing his power. Ruth saw how in an instant Grit appeared in front of him, and the blow was so strong that it caused an explosion in the area. Ruth managed to withstand it, though he was shocked to realize that a single blow had destroyed more than half of his shield. Then the twins attacked while Nin healed Ruth. After a few seconds, Ruth decided he had to do something. He provoked Grit, which the twins used to their advantage to attack, but Grit summoned a magic attack that cancelled their fusion. Then Ruth decided to attack without wasting time and used Vital Conversion to double the 20,000 damage points he had received. After the explosion, the girls gathered near the twins as Ruth saw that Grit returned unscathed. Then, in less than a second, Grit appeared in front of him and struck him. Ruth fell to the ground and couldn't see clearly. He knew he had to increase his power even further. Then he started using more mana again, making his body grow from the immense power. He attacked Grit and managed to cut him with his sword, but he was thrown far back by a single blow. Despite this, Ruth did not give up, even though he had almost no shield left, and planned to use all his mana to use Vital Conversion so he could return all the damage he had taken. He jumped to attack, but Grit dodged and hit him with a blow so powerful that it completely shattered his shield. Then Grit flew into the sky, preparing a spell to finish off Ruth, who could only ask the girls to escape. However, at that moment, everything went dark. Ruth could only hear the girls suffering and tried to move, but he couldn't feel the mana in his body, and the pain was so intense that he couldn't do anything. He then saw how all the girls were injured and defenseless. Only Luna was still conscious, and she tried to attack Grit, who kicked her and then grabbed her by the neck, choking her. Ruth couldn't bear to see the girl he had saved suffering because she couldn't breathe and everyone he cared about losing their lives because of his mistakes. He forced himself to get up and decided to use everything he had without caring about the consequences. At that moment, his mana changed from blue to completely red, and something took over his mind. In a matter of milliseconds, he managed to reach Grit and with one punch, threw him against the wall. Nin opened her eyes, shocked to see Ruth in this condition because it was unlike his usual self. His face looked like it belonged to someone else. Ruth heard a voice commanding him to destroy everything, and then he became faster than before, managing to dodge, hit, and throw his enemy to the ground. The voice said it would continue to give him more mana so he could keep hitting the enemy repeatedly without stopping. This excited him because he greatly enjoyed the sensation. At that moment, someone called out to him, but Ruth turned without recognizing them and thought he should finish them off too. However, the person approached and then hit him with a bit of magic to restore his consciousness. Ruth regained his senses for a moment and saw his bloodied hands. He realized he was starting to lose control, and at that moment, his spirit broke free again. Ruth tried to control it but still heard the voice in his head telling him to finish everything off. He remembered Ammon's words, saying that if he couldn't control his power, he would turn into a monster. So, Ruth realized that the voice was not from someone else but himself and his dark desires brought to the limit by his anger. Therefore, he decided to start breathing calmly, and thanks to the person nearby, he managed to suppress it. The person was happy to help, and Ruth knew that he couldn't lose control but had to control himself and continue protecting his comrades because they couldn't lose more due to his mistakes. At that moment, Grit got up again, showing Ruth the situation in Avantia. Ruth asked the person not to stop casting healing magic and began to concentrate while looking at images of all his comrades and acquaintances fighting against numerous monsters. Nina accepted the request, and Ruth thought of everyone in his village. He then thanked Grit because, thanks to the images shown, he managed to detect everyone with his abilities. At that moment, he activated his sacrificial shield ability, making everyone on the battlefield receive a shield, and they were amazed because they felt the benefits without being nearby. Ruth shone thanks to all the shields he absorbed, and because of that, he now became the strongest tank in the world with an absorption rate of over 100,000 points. Then, using all the power of his shield, he launched towards the demon and used Vital Conversion, striking and throwing it out of the labyrinth, making a beam of light pierce the sky. After a few hours, at the entrance of Avantia, Manisha anxiously waited for her brother. Then, from a distance, she saw him walking slightly injured and ran towards him joyfully because her brother had made it out of the labyrinth alive. Ruth was also happy to see them again and thanked Marius and Ammon for leading the troops and saving all the citizens. Then, all the adventurers and soldiers gathered around him, congratulating him on successfully conquering the labyrinth in a short time. They also celebrated that their city had the strongest tank in the world. In the following days, Ruth and his friends spent time having fun and enjoying the peace, performing their respective duties and having time to enjoy a happier life. This was very pleasing for Ruth because previously, he was just an ordinary tank in the hero group, but now he had managed to become the protagonist in his own story and also the strongest tank. Therefore, he would continue to fight to protect the people who meant the most in his life. And thus, this first season ended.